In the latest episode, Rudy walks us through his routine again, which is admittedly a bit boring and not the best way to start an episode. But as things go on, alongside having a bit of a reunion with an old friend, Rudy also eventually decides to really address his feelings for Mr. Fitz. So to begin the recap, Rudy walks us through his life again as he did maybe 2 or 3 episodes ago. And he talks about how he's exercising in the morning, how he usually eats with Zenoba and also Julie, and how he also trains with them. He goes to class where now Cliff is much more friendlier and now they have communication. And he also reveals to us that he's 16 right now, so that's a benefit of this episode. But outside of that, and mentioning that he's now considered one of the top students in class and probably the most unbeatable after the whole bodyguarding situation, it's kind of a dull beginning to the episode. I mean, even in terms of him talking with Nanohashi, in terms of what they're doing with magical circles and summoning, not a lot is said or done to really drive interest. But there's some moments that do kind of wake you up a little bit, and that's when Ellen Elise, Cliff, Rudy, and Soldat have lunch together, and Soldat, because he's just wild, he decides to call Ellen Elise a slut right in front of Cliff. But I guess at this point Cliff is either used to it, or since he's working so hard on curing her curse, he doesn't really take note of when people bring up her past anymore. Never mind, he doesn't even feel the need to even engage since she generally knows how to handle herself. But after lunch and Soldat is called to a clan meeting, as a black person, it's so weird to say that. But anyway, after he's called off to a meeting, and then Ellen Elise and Cliff decide to go adventuring, Rudy's left alone, and unfortunately for him, Zenoba and Julie are also off doing stuff. So when he sees Mr. Fitz and also his cousin Luke, he thinks, okay, I can engage, talk with them. But when Luke shuts that down and Fitz is very quiet, Rudy takes a bit of offense to that, and he's forced to go home by himself. And while he's doing that, he kind of gets a little bit lonely, and the longer he's alone, the more the thought festers about why didn't Fitz talk to him, engage him, or anything like that. And because he has no one to talk to, he just goes to find a book as a means to drown out his thoughts. Luckily though, while he's in the library, he runs across Fitz, and Fitz pretty much explains to him that when he's on duty, especially outside of campus, the reason why he's known as Silent Fitz is because the voice that he has, though he knows it's she, the voice that they have, it doesn't really hold much of a commanding presence or any type of commanding oomph. So with that, they rather speak for their magic, especially because they can do incantationist magic, and that's kind of what boasts him as a god. And Rudy understands this, and then he starts to realize that, you know what, it also could be that maybe the reason why they didn't talk to me is because that was Princess Ariel masquerading as Fitz, but he's not going to go into details with that. However, what he is starting to go into details with is that the way that Fitz smiles at them, the way that he feels, it feels very off. And again, he's starting to question his sexuality because, lest we forget, while in this new world he's 16, in the old world he was somewhere in his 30s, I believe. So combined, he's about 50 some odd years of age at this point. So in that whole period of time, he has never seemingly liked a guy in any type of way. And granted, this isn't a normal human guy, this will be an elf kind of guy, but it doesn't make sense. It doesn't click. So he decides to go to Jarius, whose name I probably pronounced wrong, who is the person who recruited him to Vanilla University, and straight up tries to get information out of him regarding Fitz, even what Fitz's sex is. And with being told that Fitz is a man, Rudy is starting to seemingly accept that for the first time in his life, he likes and potentially is in love with a guy. However, next time he sees Fitz, they kind of have this awkward moment where Fitz falls on top of him, and Rudy sees and feels enough to understand that that hand that felt too soft, and now this body on top of him, the way that it feels, Fitz is not a guy, it's a woman. And for whatever reason, Fitz feels a need to hide this. But one of the major things is that when Fitz is on top of Rudy, he gets an erection. And with that, all signs point to that man God wants you to be around and potentially be with this person. So with that, Rudy is now trying to figure out a way to be around Fitz without revealing Fitz's situation. And as you can imagine, this is going to lead to some awkward, potentially funny, but hopefully not tragic moments. So when it comes to the first highlight, it's going to be how Rudy was exploring his feelings. And I want to first acknowledge, yes, there are Yuri anime, there's Yao anime, or Boys Love, whichever way you prefer to call it. But I feel like a lot of those animes, it's not like in the Western world where you see them marketed and really get that kind of push to the forefront. Instead, they feel very much kind of niche, pushed to the side. And yes, for people who are fans of that, they could easily fall in love and promote that type of stuff. But if that's not your main thing, if you are mostly into mainstream anime, it's not that easy to find that type of stuff. So for something like Jobless Reincarnation, which is a show that has 2 seasons right now, which has, between the first season and now the second season, going to have about 40 episodes, to have a character question their sexuality the way that Rudy is, I feel like it's a major thing, even if we know that Sophie is not a guy whatsoever. But just to have the lead have these type of feelings, question them, and even come to the point of accepting it just because they like and even love this person and love being around them that much, I think that is kind of a major thing. Never mind, it also can lead to the way for some form of LGBT conversations for, we're going to assume that Fitz very much still identifies as a woman, but just presents himself as a man or even non-binary. But there's a lot that goes into that can be explored and even can continue to question or lead to more questions when it comes to Rudy in terms of him generally, before all this, liking women who had big breasts or had very feminine figures. Meanwhile, the person who gets him erect and he fell in love with is somebody who isn't necessarily voluptuous, but is somebody who personality-wise clicks with him in a way that nobody else does, and potentially has ever. So that should be very interesting. And I just want to also note that I kind of like the way that they did this reveal versus the way they could have done it, which, as someone on the Crunchyroll comment section said, it could have easily been one of those situations where, especially if you ever seen a lot of the old school transmedia, not so much in the new transmedia, where the person doesn't realize this person is trans or non-binary until it's a sexual situation, and then a lot of times it gets violent. But thankfully, we don't have to worry about that trope, and instead we can just enjoy things which definitely are going to require some conversations, will probably be made light of, but at the very least, it's not going to go toward a dark place. For the second highlight, while they're still kind of dragging out Rudy and Sophie realizing who the other person is and getting together, I have to admit, just having this light at the end of the tunnel is so helpful. And granted, I don't know if Sophie became aware that Rudy got an erection or not, but at the very least, we're told that in this episode, she's aware that he's at least being abstinent. So with him not doing like his cousin Luke and kind of spreading himself around, maybe that can calm her jealousy a little bit. I don't think it's going to kill off her insecurities regarding who she is and whether she's desired, but at the same time, with Rudy now potentially, I won't say sniffing up her leg or humping her leg, but, taking more initiative to be around her, to make his feelings known. Potentially by the time the season finale hits, hopefully, since I think the second arc of this season doesn't happen till April, maybe we could have them, maybe date, have a confession, have a cute kiss moment, just something. The last highlight for us is just that Rudy communicated his feelings, and I think that's a major thing, especially after the Sarah situation, and even the Era situation as well. Because I don't feel like, even though Rudy spent a lot of time with Soul Dad and those two bonded, that maybe he's gotten rid of and handled all his baggage. So him feeling rejected and even kind of abandoned in that situation where Luke was speaking for Fitz and Fitz didn't say anything, and then him addressing that the next time they saw each other in private, I feel like that's a sense of growth. And I think that growth is going to expand as we see those two try to hash out their feelings, especially considering the position that Sophie is in. Because Sophie can't just start openly dating Rudy. I mean, granted, they could, and it just seems like a gay relationship with them knowing that they're really heterosexual, but it's hard to say whether or not the show's going to take that approach, never mind how Rudy's going to handle it, or even how Fitz could handle it. But setting that aside and all that complication is also the fact that, again, Rudy in his past life didn't have any relationship. His relationship with Eris was low-key toxic, and the abandonment issues that she caused pretty much led to him having ED. And then when you add Sarah into the mix, the way that their relationship went, he blew that up based off of him having ED, not explaining it, and then the first chance he got, he put her down rather than explain why he was unable to get it up. So, between him having this healthy relationship where he feels perhaps comfortable enough to communicate, him maybe not getting up in the first time and, having to have a real conversation about his situation with a woman, never mind a woman that he has feelings for, it really does help you understand between the LGBT stuff, the binary stuff, Rudy's first real relationship that can be considered healthy. There's a lot of stuff that's coming that's going to really test how much Rudy has grown as a person in terms of not just how he handles his communication, but also how he handles his own feelings and someone's reaction to it, especially when that person loves him and perhaps wants to work with him. So overall, I feel like this perhaps is one of the few shows that can have what genuinely feels like a very mundane episode and it not be bad. Granted, I still feel like it's sort of dragging out this whole Sophie and Rudy thing, but I feel like at this point, it's less about dragging things out in terms of making filler and more so trying to build up anticipation, especially since it knows there's going to be a multi-month gap between the mid-season finale and the mid-season premiere.